In this video, I'm going to go through the footwear industry report. This is the first place I turn when I start to look at how teams performed. And if you remember that cliche I used in the introductory videos, how we doing, why we doing, and how we going to do better. The footwear industry report really helps me start to understand very quickly how we did, and then it gives me some important introduction as to why we did. So I played as company F in this round of the simulation. I really didn't play at all. I didn't save my changes that you saw me playing. So all I did was let the settings ride. I'll delete this company before practice round 2 processes, so it won't be there anymore, or I will for sure delete it before the game begins. But this just allows me to have a company to click into. I'm going to talk about the practice round from the perspective of company F, and I'm going to talk about it as if everybody was playing seriously. So nobody get offended if I criticize your company or wonder what you were doing. We all know it's just the preseason, nothing matters, and you weren't trying to optimize your performance. But from the standpoint of trying to learn how to analyze the footwear industry report and the information it gives you, we have to treat it as though it was serious and we were trying to do our best. So I look in here and I say, well, I finished kind of in the middle of the pack. Pretty far down, kind of solidly third tier. There was B that was up in the stratosphere, A, and then the rest of us that were kind of jam-packed with C somewhat falling out of the bottom. This is what happened in the most recent round. This is what happens in the individual round. Obviously, cumulatively, this will have memory in it, whereas this is what happened last round. So I take that snapshot and I say, how did I do? I kind of did middle of the pack, and I tend to pay attention to the companies that outperform me. So I remember B, A, E, F. Go on to the next slide. I'm sorry, the next page, and there really isn't anything to see here that I have not already figured out from the previous. This just gives me the details. Earnings per share, not great. Return on equity, not great. Stock price, not great. And all of these things are because they're all driven off my income, so that's why they're so highly correlated. Into the credit rating, sometimes I will get key information here if somebody has tanked their credit rating, but nobody has. Image rating, this is not good. You can see my image rating decreased to 66, and that's not good because next round I'm going to have a hard time overcoming that in terms of demand, because remember, one of the second tier factors in determining my demand is my image rating. So I guess the only good news is that D and E are the only ones who are better than me. Or I'm sorry, A is also, but I'm not woefully out the bottom of the pack. But that's concerning to me. And probably what that says is I would know that I was running a relatively low star shoe, and also that that tells me my market share wasn't all that great. Into corporate social responsibility, somebody spent as high as 10 million, as low as 0, so that's too low. That might be okay, might be too high. The average, okay. I certainly track where I fall on that. Bonus points. Off of the Bullseye Award, I get some critical information because it starts to tell me how well I forecast the market and who did it better than me. But there are some really interesting things in these results. I'm like, what in the world did B do that they beat their forecast by that much? And to be honest with you, even though after I've gone through the results, I'm still not quite sure how they missed their forecast by that much. Typically, when you see somebody miss their forecast, it's because they won all their special order bids, but they didn't include them in their financial results. Here, I'm not quite clear how they did that well, but you can see, well, they were clearly in the upper tier of revenue. And when you come over to their earnings per share, wow, they did fantastic. So they made a lot more money than everybody else. So at this point, I'm thinking that B is a superstar, and I'm really going to have to figure out what B is doing. I'll give you a hint. That's really not the case. And so that'll be interesting. But I get a sense of how well people forecast and what they did. And so we'll just see what happens. The Leapfrog Award, this is just awarding the team that had the biggest improvement. So I tell people you only want to win it at most once, because if you win it more than that, that means you're jumping around too much. in the industry overview, this is where I start to get a sense of why I performed. So I've really gotten kind of the how I did question answered. This is the beginning of the why. There's a lot of general messages in here that allow me to begin to build awareness of the industry as a whole. Okay, low industry wide superior material usage, 39.5. That's not really much. And so this tells me the factors that affect superior material usage. I can see that the branded shoes available were 9.9% higher than demand. Okay, that's good to know. This gives me some more indications of demand. Stock out, it says that, believe it or not, what it's saying here is that we didn't have enough shoes to meet the demand in North America. But this is going to be really significant here. See this 2322? These are companies that didn't have enough shoes to meet all of their orders. And you're going to see that in the competitive intelligence report that we'll look at in the next video. But that's a little bit interesting. And then down here, it basically says private label. Wow, a lot of unmet demand in private label. So the Targets and the Walmarts of the world aren't happy because we didn't make enough shoes for them. This is a key insight into the future. These numbers are just standard. They just kind of regurgitate what the syllabus, or I'm sorry, what the guide already tells you. It says this is we've got 14.2% greater supply than demand, and so that says probably shouldn't be going on a big building spree. This does let me keep track of what everybody else did and what they've done in terms of equipment. So this allows me to spot if somebody's trying to break out in the industry and build a whole lot of capacity. And sometimes that's a key piece of competitive intelligence. The next number is the financial performance. And this is real important as I get to the why questions. So I'm looking at revenue. I was just pretty much, to be honest, average. I was below average or I should say below average. I was below average in internet sales, below average in wholesale sales, but I did do a little bit better in private label. And so you can see that led to me being about $50 million below in revenue. And so I know at this point, my market share isn't where I want it to be. Okay. Cost of pair sold, and this is not a good sign. I'm only $6 million below the industry average in cost of goods sold, but I'm $50 million below the revenue. So that's kind of tipping me off. Some things in here as you grow and experience are going to help you out, and you'll be able to cue in on different things. I look at marketing expenses. You can see that I under-marketed. That's something I pay attention to against the industry average. And then we come over here to net profit. Do you remember the order of finish? It was B, then A, and then E, and then me. And guess what? That perfectly correlates with how much money they made. And that's why I emphasized in the video introduction, when it comes to your trying to score well, it's about having the highest profit. And you can see B had the highest profit, and guess what? Earnings per share higher. No surprise, because earnings is in the numerator. Return on equity is higher. No surprise, because return is net profit is in the numerator. Stock price is high. No kidding, because I made a lot of dollars per share. So you want to make money. Then I can get some tips into the balance sheet. You can see I ended up with a lot of cash on hand. B ended up with a ton of cash on hand. Not quite sure why that is. You can see that they also took out probably some loans to make that happen. I see that 2 companies bought back stock, D issued stock. They're not going to like that in the long run. But I get a chance to look at everybody's capital structure, which I would be able to do in the real world if we're all publicly traded companies. Come down to the margins. You have to keep these margins in mind with your strategy. If you're running a cost leadership strategy and you're really going for volume, it's not surprising to see your profit margins be relatively thin. But if you're trying to run a differentiation strategy and you're giving up a little bit of market share and you're seeing thin profit margins, then that would be a real problem. Here you get a chance to look at what people did with their payouts, some key credit measures, This might tip me off if somebody's taking a lot of risk, but I'd also see that in their credit ratings. And then shares of outstanding stock, get to see that. But this number right here jumps out at me in a big way. B, who crushed it, ended the year with 248 days of inventory. That should not be. And ladies and gentlemen, that tells me that B is a flash in the pan. Basically, I know at this point I could ignore B because I'm going to see something when I get to the competitive intelligence report that's going to confirm my suspicion, which is their market share has plummeted. They probably did that by raising their prices really high. So they made a lot of money because they had great profit margins on the shoes they sold. But guess what? They didn't sell a lot of shoes. Now, the way the accounting is done, the cost of manufacturing all these shoes, it's held off of this year's books because it's put aside going, well, they were not sold. But guess what? That cost is there. And next year, they're going to have to clear all those shoes out, and they're going to lose a ton of money when they do. And their market share is so low, they're not going to have good sales next year. So I think that's what I'm going to see when I get to the competitive intelligence report. We'll see if I'm right. But this completely shifts my perspective when I see this. I'm like, oh, B was a flash in the pan. They're really not somebody that dominated me in the first round. Next, I go into the production benchmarks. This is where I really start to get some good ideas about why I did. And you're going to see it breaks it down factory by factory. So let's just go through one. I look at things like, what is my labor cost per shoe? 8.7, right around the industry average. Okay, not too bad. Six Sigma, the lowest investment in the industry. That's something I have to be concerned about. Superior materials, right around the average. Total production cost, I'm the lowest in the industry. That sounds pretty good, but I'm going to obviously have some demand issues. So I think I've maybe not built a good enough shoe. My reject rates, kind of high. That's also a problem. Cost per star, high. If you're running a low star strategy, that's not always, sometimes that number is going to be up there. But you see this somebody else running with $3.191 per star. Oof, they might be given a run for my money. So I compare my numbers against the low, the average, and the high to see where I'm stacking up. And this starts to give me a very good sense of how I compared to my rivals in terms of production costs. And that's a big part of how I did. And again, I can do that in both my factories, and the picture may be different in the two factories, so you have to look at them independently. Then I come into operating benchmarks. This again gives me some comparisons. You can say, even though I had the lowest cost of pairs sold, when it came to operating profit, I had the lowest operating profit per dollar sold. And so what that's telling me is I just did not get a lot of money for my shoes. Marketing, somebody over here was really marketing their shoes very high in the wholesale segment. Notice that there's the internet segment and then in the wholesale segment. And so these are things that I want to look at. So I should be looking at over here in profit margin, actually pretty good. But the problem was I just didn't sell as much as I would want to. I can look at it region by region. And again, just for the sake of tonight, of this video's length, I'm not going to go through all four regions, but you do have to go through all four regions because it could be very different. Down in private label, I can see, hey, I did sell into private label and I made some decent money there. I made $2.62, which is not the low, not the high. Okay, so that's pretty good. And I did relatively well in all the regions. Didn't make a lot of money on Latin America. In fact, I was the lowest, so maybe I could bid higher in Latin America. And then into the celebrities. This is who won what. And I can come over here and see what it's going to look like. And wow, what sticks out is E really invested in celebrities. And how much did they have to pay to get them? Ooh, those were cheap. They had really cheap celebrities. So I know going in, E is going to be problematic next round for me, perhaps because they've got some some really cheap celebrities that should help them out. These two charts, these four charts give you an idea of what people did. So we can see prices went up and quality went up. Although you have to, because the scales can be so dramatic, you have to pay careful attention to how this works. But it does give you a sense of where the industry is going. So let's see, I'm looking, it's taken me 15 minutes to explain the footwear industry report. And honestly, I think that's about how long you're going to need to spend looking at the footwear industry report every time you do it, because there's a lot of key information in this. Next is the competitive intelligence report.